thank you for joining the infrastructure optimization at the Edge panel. My name is David Klauser with Virtuozzo. I will be your moderator for today's session. And I would like to introduce our two guest speakers, Alex Fine from Virtuozzo and Alex Miro. If you both could take a moment and introduce yourselves, please.
Sure. Thank you, David. Hi, everyone. I'm Alex Fine, CEO at Virtuozzo. Been in the industry for the last 15 years, started at Parallels, changed the regions and product lines, lived in a few countries, ended up now living for the last 4 years in London, and rejoined back to the original business in Virtuozzo as a CEO 2 years ago. And since then, we're getting our company higher and higher.
Excellent. Thank you. Alex Miro?
Hi, my name is Alex Miro. I'm Vice President for Storage and Cyber Infrastructure at Acronis. Been in the infrastructure industry and the enterprise software for over 30 years. Done lots of interesting things, starting from a company called Virtuozzo back almost 30 years ago now. It was at VMware, done a number of interesting startups. And at Acronis, I'm responsible, as my title says, responsible for developing and deploying the background infrastructure that supports the full set of Acronis cyber protection services. And we work very closely with Virtuozzo. And I'm hailing from Silicon Valley, California right now.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen. And before we go on, Alex, fine. Could you tell the audience a little bit more about Virtuozzo?
Absolutely, sure. So we've been in virtualization and software-defined storage business for 20 years. The company was established in 2000, and we were live with our first production products in 2001. We are specialists in Linux, in virtualization, in KVM, one of the leading contributors worldwide in the open source. So we're not just using it, we are actually creating the underlying technology for our solutions, virtualization, system containers, hypervisors, software-defined storage, and most recently introduced hyper-converged infrastructure solution that we will touch a bit more on during today's session. We have 450 plus active partners worldwide, service providers primarily. So 95% of our customers is service providers, all the large hosting providers, the largest ones. They've been working with us for 15 plus years, basically driving the entire VPS offering, virtual private service offering on Virtuozzo technology, and now enriching it with our new capabilities. And we have 110 employees all over the world, from Mexico City to Sydney, with R&D being in Russia and headquarters being in Switzerland.
Great. Thank you for that. Okay. So that's a background about our speakers and more about Virtuozzo. Alex Miro, let's shift now and really dig in here. How did we get here? Talk about the evolution of the internet and how we've evolved to this point.
All right, thank you, David. So you see a version of the slides that I'm sure you've seen in different incarnations if you've been in the industry and career for any period of time. Basically, how the computing technology has been developing since the very ancient days that in these slides we decided to mark as 1970. That probably goes a little bit earlier. And that was the time of the mainframe when the computers were big, expensive, everything was centralized. There was a single system, there was multiple terminals connected, people accessing like one single brain, one single mainframe through what was considered to be back then remote connections that were very short. Fast forward to late 1980s, 1990s through 2000s, that was the era of the client server and the PC personal computers. Not necessarily, I mean, there was synonymous with PC and Windows. And again, the idea was that the processing got much more decentralized. You still have a centralized servers, but so much more processing was done on the, what we can call now edge. nobody used the term back then, but if you think about it, that even this certain amount of database processing, lookup, content creation was happening on the rather powerful personal computers that in many ways were comparable in their computing capacity to a local server in your office. Of course, the mainframes were still there, sitting in the banks, ticket reservation offices, but so much more computing kind of moved out of the pure mainframe area up front. That's what people saw that. And then as the new millennium came about, we see that, again, some of you may probably remember the term utility computing that showed up right about at the beginning of 2000s. I mean, how can we create a free computing capacity as a utility? You get something, certain specific functionality and you need your computing services, and you use them kind of in the way as you plug in your electricity into your outlet. That was the idea. And that idea was in many ways realized with the advent of the cloud computing and the hyperscalers. So you all know all the big names there. Sort of towards the second half of 2000s, around 2010, things like cloud computing became synonymous with the future development of the computing technology. And the cloud computing started consuming almost all of the heavy duty processing you can think of. I mean, your web servers, your hosting, it's all happens in reality in what can be called cloud computing. And the primary device for accessing your information is now probably the smartphone. Again, so you see this kind of waves going on from one centralization, distant centralization, and then another level of the very high centralization. We look at that was the cloud computing. In today's world, things are changing again, and you can claim that they go towards decentralization, and that's where the edge computing terminology comes into play. Now we see that the computing power of the individual devices, I'm sure you all heard the term IoT, in Internet of Things. So the amount of computing power you have in your all the little things, sensors, household devices, and every piece of your car, I mean, all those examples, is tremendous. So the necessity to handle that computing power, control, manage, direct the data flows, pushes it creates the necessity to have a dedicated centralized nodes far away from the central cloud computing data centers. And that's what we call edge. So I think it's important for us to kind of define what edge is.
Yeah, no, actually, you couldn't have set the next question up for Mr. Fine any better. That was a great summary of more than 50 years in the journey and how we got here. But now that we're here, Alex, Fine, what exactly is edge computing, and what are we referring to when we talk about infrastructure optimization at the edge?
Yeah, right. So it's indeed going the wave. So mainframe, then PC, then cloud. So it's getting from the central point to the customer, again to the central point, now back to the customer. So edge is basically a compute and storage that is brought back to the end customer, to the consumer of the technology. And why is that? So at some point, it was looking like, the hyperscalers, Amazon, Azure, Google, they will just take over IT altogether. But no, it's not happening, obviously. We are seeing that there is a growing demand for locally relevant and locally placed compute and storage capacity. And this is caused by a few reasons. And one of them is proliferation of the connectivity. So 5G is making it possible to connect truly billions devices worldwide. Each one of us is having dozens, and then all the manufacturing process and different industries are having each of them adding thousands and thousands of devices. So in the end, we're ending up with like 30 billion devices worldwide that are collecting some data, and they need to process it. So process where? The distance between your sensor, between your data, between your collecting point of data and the super processing power of hyperscalers can sometimes be quite substantial, can be, hundreds and thousands of miles. And while you need to have a compute and you need to have processing power just immediately next to the points where you're gathering information, because you need to make decisions in real time. You need to collect something, you need to analyze, you need to filter it, and then only then you need to push the data back into the hyperscaler. So with IoT, as Alex mentioned, with 5G, edge is becoming a necessity, and they're kind of always intertwining with each other, IoT, big data, and edge, because they are always working together. And this is actually bringing back relevance to the regional cloud and service providers. So they will not disappear. They are relevant, will be relevant, and they will be responsible for the last mile that, according to some analysts, will be still 30% of the cloud business will be not coming to or through hyperscalers. It will be in regional service providers. So these millions edge nodes that you are seeing here, these are your traditional server farms that will be based in regional service providers, and they will be processing all those data, infinite data coming from the sensors and devices at the forefront of our capabilities, and then they will be processing something, and then they will be engaging hyperscalers. So this middle tier here, edge nodes, is exactly where the regional service providers will play the very significant role. So that will be only more and more important, because just the data proliferation is exponentially growing now.
Yep. No, that's great. And as you can see here on the next slide, it shows that by 2028, the market that we're discussing is going to be more than 700 billion USD in size, across a variety of horizontal and vertical sectors, whether it's enterprise IT, healthcare, automotive, manufacturing, but smart cities. But one thing is for certain is the proliferation and the growth and the necessity for the edges there. And I really like, Alex, how you highlighted and referenced the importance of the regional service providers. Let's talk a little bit more about that. What exactly is the role of the regional service providers to deliver this?
So David, let me take on a couple of items here first, where we're going on there. So if I kind of look back at all this previous slides that we covered, you see that what we have right now in the modern world is extremely large, complicated, distributed, and interconnected computing system, where everything's connected to each other. When you have your data and your computing capacity, something that happens at the point of the creation of information or consumption of information, be that personal or enterprise going on. And then so you have this ultimate kind of processing point or storage point in the big cloud, but there are lots of things happening in between, because not all the data has to go all the way up to the ultimate cloud. You have a problem with network capacity. You have the problem with the power and the storage. And I think the very important role for regional service providers is to provide the tier, as Alex Fine described a couple of slides ago. First of all, in order to preserve and limit the power consumption, the amount of storage that needs to be consumed by all the data in the central cloud, as we kind of processing that and making sure that certain data stays local for the purpose of processing. Before moving it forward, I mean, the classical example, for example, the various AI surveillance system, where you have the important function of the face recognition. And it's an extremely both a power, compute, and storage hungry process. And if you try to use that technology in the standard cloud computing way, like we do today, it will overwhelm both your power requirements at the central servers. It will overwhelm your storage capacity at the cloud, not to mention network capacity. So you can have those, and this is just one example, but that pretty much applies to almost every data process of every class of data and application in today's world. So the role of the regional service providers is to provide, as the name says, this intermediate capability to reduce the necessity and the reliance on the back-end big cloud, process the data locally and kind of select what data goes upstream, what stays and get processed locally at that particular location, reduce the power consumption therefore required for that, and network requirement. Latency is a very important point of the network capability, network requirements, because if your algorithms rely on a certain amount of capacity that happens in the cloud, then you're very limited to what can you do in the system, because latency is something that is all very difficult or impossible to reduce per se, unless you do some really smart distribution and tiered architecture. I mean, there's an old saying, I mean, you can, if you need more bandwidth, you can buy it with money. If you need to reduce the latency, you have to bribe God. And that's the fundamental thing. Is the role of the local service providers and the edge data centers is actually to reduce the reliance on latency and therefore enable more complex and intelligent algorithm and data processing in your environment, in your architecture.
No, that's great. And Alex, fine. What about the value and the importance of local support and data sovereignty?
Yes. So in a nutshell, you know, it's always like technology and then all the rest, right? So technology, Alex spoke about this. It's super important. It should be physically present next to the customers, end customers. But that's not only it. So when you're getting back to the end customer, you need to have a personal touch. You need to have a locally relevant support organization. And this is something where, again, regional service providers, they can shine because they know the end customers. They know people who would be the final enterprises, the end customers who are consuming all those, utilizing all those sensors, who need all this data, and they will be supporting them, and they will be supporting the IT infrastructure. This locally relevant IT infrastructure should be also supported by locally relevant organization, speaking the same language, understanding the culture, understanding the requirement, understanding what, you know, every word in this language means, because there is no direct translation between any language to any language. So local support is surely a unique advantage of the regional service providers. And also, you know, when you are dealing with them, you can get pretty much any level of attention to your needs just based on your specific needs. And that's something that you cannot get even if you are a huge customer with like $100 million bill with the hyperscalers. You will not necessarily get that tailored support treatment that you would require. You will not be able to speak with the CEO or the next level of the organization and, you know, ask them, guys, I need this one, not what you're doing today, but something different. Well, you know, if it is in our roadmap, you are lucky, but if not, then sorry about this. So local support, local relevance is super important, but also data sovereignty. That's the name of the game, and it depends definitely on which region you are based in. So different games in different region. And if you leave America, United States, and you are getting to Europe, you're getting to Asia, and then you are seeing all this data sovereignty regulations that are already pretty much present everywhere in most countries outside of US, and the countries just want to protect their privacy, their end customers' data. And this is a law, and this is becoming mandatory requirement, and not necessarily only even in the location of the data center, but whose data center is that? So the data center of a hyperscaler is still data center of the American company. So is it okay? Is it compliant with the local regulations? Not necessarily. And we're seeing this massive developments happening here in Europe, where service providers, you know, often maybe competing service providers, they're uniting behind the idea of European sovereign cloud, because they want to provide to their end customers here in countries the relevant services. And that's not only happening in Europe, also in other countries outside, in other regions in Asia, in Africa, Latin America. So all these things, they are kind of playing together with the locally provided infrastructure and making this unique offering that service providers can bring to the market.
Excellent, great, thank you. And then if we look at the next slide, we transition from what to how. talk about what is actually being delivered to optimize the edge from the regional service providers. Alex, fine, if you could speak about hybrid power shortly, and then Alex, Miro, the rest, that would be great.
Yeah, so by hybrid power, we mean basically a very simple thing, that the majority of the end customers are today living already in the concept of hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, whatever you call this. They want to have freedom. They want to say that I want to keep this data on my premises, close to my heart, not even with service provider. And I'm happy to put service provider in management and possession of these particular workloads and data. And then I'm happy also to use hyperscalers for third type of data. So by hybrid power, we basically mean here the ecosystem, the organization, the framework when end customer, regional service provider, and hyperscalers will be playing together, and where the final IT infrastructure, the appliance, if you like, can be placed in either of these spots.
And I can add to that. So if you kind of try to, whatever the typical image people use, like peel the onion, and what is the edge data center delivered by those in particular or other things? It's essentially a combination of compute capability and storage capability. Because in order to do all the processing and do the separation of functionality that we talked about earlier, you have to have a capability to do various compute tasks. So think about it as a cloud or private cloud capability to create essentially any compute job, any compute workload to run it locally at that edge data center. And compute capability is inseparable from a high performance, what we call a hot storage, which is the storage that gives you the ultimate high performance with very high transactional rates. That's what you need to do the compute capability, especially if you start going into the new types of workload processing, IoT streams, or specific workloads related to machine learning and artificial intelligence. That's you need to do more and more to do it on the edge. At the same time, you want to definitely separate your data locations, especially if you think about going upstream to a logic cloud or hyperscalers. We talked about data sovereignty, and what it means that if for certain reasons you have to keep your data archive for a specified, often dictated by regulation period of time, and you're not even allowed to push it outside your data sovereignty limit in many ways. So that kind of brings the necessity to have a cold storage capability for keeping archives with all the SLA and the requirements and guarantees that comes with the necessity to do the archiving. And that's the cold storage capability that Virtuozzo provides in the edge data centers, combined with compute. Why? And I think that's important to talk about the security component. Security is often thought, people think about as an afterthought, but it is not. Again, you're at the Acronis Cyber Summit, where cybersecurity, cyber protect is one of the central threads and topic of the summit. I might add here that as we start talking about the edge, which is we extend our architecture and our components in space and the different locales and different jurisdictions, you are therefore in kind of increasing what the security professional calls attack surface. Places things can go wrong. In your certain jurisdictions, you do not necessarily have as well qualified IT security professionals. So a capable, operational, and actually useful edge infrastructure is inseparable from a first-class security. And that's what is included as a part of the architecture provided by Virtuozzo as a part of the edge data centers. And that includes a combination of all the things you think in security: authentication, encryption, secure data storage, and also ability to do the active security processing on all the components, protect your compute capability, verified authorized computing, and protect your storage, both hot and cold, from malware and any kind of attempts to go ahead and steal your data.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And frankly, here we've just got a couple slides left here. I know we've got maybe 5 minutes or so left, but that's what we're most excited about sharing with our partners today, is how Acronis Cyber Protect combined with Virtuozzo's hybrid infrastructure can accomplish that and deliver exactly that. And there's no one better to kind of summarize this than our CEO, Alex. So if you could just talk about what that solution looks like together.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been partnering with Acronis for years, basically. And now I think that we have a unique bundle, great solution that addresses both the requirements of regional service providers in terms of what they have, and also in terms of how safely and securely they can deliver this. And we are offering together a software bundle solution of Virtuozzo hybrid infrastructure. It is our hyper-converged infrastructure solution together with Acronis Cyber Protect Cloud. So in hybrid infrastructure, you have basically all the components that service provider needs to build private or public infrastructure. You have highly performant compute, you have a storage component, software-defined storage that is addressing all the storage protocols available today, a software-defined network, and surely we're offering the best TCO on the market. This whole solution is tailored for service provider needs because we are a company that's been servicing service providers for 20 years. So this is our DNA, this is our target market, these are our partners. Surely we enable pay-as-you-go model because this is how service providers transact with the end customers. And we are bringing you best of both worlds. It's a commercial software, but this is built to some extent on open source. So in particular for management, we are bringing you OpenStack-based component and hence OpenStack-based API, surely supporting multi-tenancy and self-service. So you as a service provider can host multiple customers on one installation and giving you and your customers a management portal, self-service portal. So we are having this software bundle solution where we are providing infrastructure and Acronis is protecting this infrastructure exactly the way as Alex described. And optionally, we are also offering this as a bundle with the hardware. So we have a bunch of partners worldwide that we're building together our solution. One of them is DearWay. So a service provider can basically get an appliance, pre-built hardware, software from Virtuozzo, software from Acronis, and they can just plug and start operating this and providing the services to their customers. And more than this, so if we go to the next slide, and we were talking about the hybrids, idea of hybrids, and let me extend it one step further. So end customer with their on-premise capacity on their premise IT, and service provider, our partners, yourselves, with the Virtuozzo hybrid infrastructure on your sites. And finally, we're also offering Virtuozzo hybrid cloud. That's a new solution. That's a new delivery vehicle from Virtuozzo that we are launching in Q1 2021, first in Europe and then almost immediately in US and then other regions. So you will be able basically to burst out quickly from your capacity, your capabilities of your data centers into our data centers and build truly hybrid solution for your end customers. That is basically our vision of the hybrid world. This is how we enable edge use case and all the use cases that are basically growing next to and from the edge computing. So in terms of evolution of Virtuozzo, there's been a story actually. So we started our business as enablement software for the new nascent industry of the service providers, hosting providers actually at the time. So we were super focused on the providers like GoDaddy, like 1&1, who were starting their virtual private server services at the time in early 2000, and our idea was to provide them like with a superb density solution for their customers, because with a high density solution for them, because hosting provider business in a nutshell is a business of putting as many possible customers on one physical piece of hardware with a decent quality. And we reached it with the introducing and inventing at the time technology system containers, and that was our start. And we were having at the time Linux containers and Windows containers. And Windows containers we discontinued after a few years, because it was always quite difficult and cumbersome to catch up with the proprietary operation system that was not overly cooperating with us in terms of letting us reach the kernel and virtualize it and create and update our software. So it was always kind of difficult catch-up game, and that we in the end disregarded, and we just discontinued this. And instead we had to enter the space of virtual machines, hypervisors, that we did about the year 2010. And since then we were having two technology, system containers and virtual machines. Then we added to this software-defined storage, fully proprietary, that was developed in-house during our Perils time. And now we're providing to our service providers not only virtualization, but also a complementary software-defined storage piece for the enterprise-grade offering. So not for the super cheap, the most cost-effective offering, but for those where the redundancy and quality are becoming a value, sellable good. So we introduced software-defined storage. And in the end, few years ago, we started looking for next big step and where we're going to develop from there. What are the new industries which are starting exponential growth? And then we noticed hyperconverged infrastructure that we realized that we have a hypervisor at the time. We have software-defined storage. So what we needed is actually the final piece, and that is actually a massive one, the management component, the multi-tenancy, self-service, and obviously virtual networking. And that we introduced based on various OpenStack components. Putting this together, we spent 3 years developing this solution, and we released it last year, hyperconverged infrastructure. And from then, basically everything is expanding. So on one side, we're offering this to hosting providers. On the other side, we are now reaching out to a large managed service provider community who are just providing not virtual private servers, but also overall private and public cloud services to their customers. So this is what we are today. We are still super committed and dedicatedly serving our hosting provider community with the VPS offering enablement. At the same time, we're opening the market with the regional service providers for them to be able to efficiently serve SMB segment. Actually, there are not so many alternatives to Virtuozzo in this space, if I may say.
So Alex, let me kind of elaborate a little bit more on the things you covered, mostly on the history of the company. But again, going a little bit more technology, if that the containers usually associated with the word of the Docker and now Kubernetes has been around in the mainstream of IT industry about 6 to 7 years. Kind of distinctly remember summer of 2014, I was talking to one of the big investment banking in London when they suddenly start talking about how we're going to build everything around containers. And if we go back to the history of Virtuozzo and Acronis, then the containers and the open as the VZ containers for Virtuozzo or open VZ containers has been around since at least the second half of around 2007. As I understand correctly, they are much more dense in the way that you can probably pack in the same hardware 3 times as many Virtuozzo containers as if you do the other kind of Linux containers down in the mainstream. And so granted, in certain applications that doesn't really make a lot of difference, but there are plenty of applications and use cases, hosting providers, service providers, people who actually provide the compute services through as managed service providers, that makes a lot of difference, because that brings down the TCO for providers for providing the same amount capability way down. And the same applies to storage. Again, storage is a joint development of Virtuozzo and Acronis. This is our own technology developed from scratch, and we can go into more details, but it is much more performant and has a wider variety of features and scales better than pretty much anything you can get your hands on, definitely in the open source world, as well as many other proprietary solutions that tend to be clustered around specific hardware solutions rather than generic solutions. So we are totally hardware agnostic, as long as the hardware that you're using is Linux capable, which is pretty much any hardware you can think of these days. And just one of the reasons I'm mentioning that is to make an awareness that between Virtuozzo and Acronis, you're dealing with a extremely highly qualified engineering R&D team that actually been doing a groundbreaking development for many years at all levels of the system software that is typically associated with the much bigger companies who contribute to, for example, a Linux kernel or Linux upstream.
David, can you add a bit about your experience with the actual real life customers, because you are in the field, all your time. So how are we doing there with enablement?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's what I love most, is to get to work with partners just like many of you on a daily basis, and help them realize this opportunity and to better serve their customers and their ecosystem. And I'll talk about a couple specific examples, but before that, I just wanted to reiterate again what I've appreciated most with Virtuozzo over the last couple of years in working with our MSPs and service providers is the vision and the commitment that we're making possible, which is to help our service providers, cloud service providers or MSPs, help their customers in delivering a cloud operating model from anywhere at any time, right? Today, we're talking about optimizing that infrastructure for the edge, but it's important to realize it's a holistic, right, end-to-end approach from the core to the hybrid cloud to the edge. And what we're seeing with partners all across the Americas is it's very powerful to give each of our partners an alternative to hyperscalers, right? And the flexibility to meet the workload demands of their customers. A lot of our MSPs or service providers will be supporting the small to medium enterprise. Others will be supporting fellow MSPs. But it's all about application and workload agility in being able to make that happen. And some specific examples, if we look in the United States to begin with, we've got regional partners that may have been a traditional reseller or were a traditional MSP, but like Joe's Data Center in Kansas City, United States, they have now standardized on Virtuozzo to build out their private and hybrid cloud to be able to support their core customers, but also to be able to realize and to enable edge use cases all across the United States. As a matter of fact, they were a regional service provider in the heartland US, but with the growth and the emergence of edge use cases and opportunities, they decided that they're going to expand and they're going to have a regional pod on the West Coast, of course, in the core, and then on the East Coast. So they're actually expanding their footprint to meet those regional needs based on the use cases. And And we've got distributors and cloud service providers across Latin America as well, Mexico, Brazil, Central America, who are now standardizing on Virtuozzo to be able to build and to meet these exact needs. And then the last one I'll just mention quickly, Alex, is Cloud South in South Florida in the United States. So they're building South Florida's first IoT network and leveraging Virtuozzo for their cloud to be able to meet the storage and the compute requirements. So they're in the process of building that out. But that's just a few examples of how Virtuozzo with Acronis is enabling this end-to-end portfolio from the edge to the core to the cloud.
Thank you, David, for sharing.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. We can now transition to the Q&A section of the infrastructure optimization at the edge, and Virtuozzo will be at our partner booth for the rest of the week. We invite all of you to visit. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank you, David and Alex. That was a great talk.
Our pleasure.
Yeah, so I'm super interested if you could tell me a little bit about the reason that you came to the Acronis Summit, what you're looking forward to achieving in our community. Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about the relationship and the opportunity that you see.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Bill. That's actually quite simple. So we had quite a bit of synergy and overlap in positive way between the companies. Historically, the companies are quite connected, having pretty much the same origin about 20 years ago. We are technology partners, so we work together on a couple of underlying infrastructure elements, and then we have a technology bundle. So as we spoke about the solution, we have today a perfect bundle of totally secure and safe infrastructure solution for MSP. So this is very logical that we are here. And finally, both companies, we are aiming at the same target market, the same partners, the same potential partners. It's MSPs. So there is a huge synergy, and this is why we're here, and we're looking forward to speak with as many possible managed service providers at the event and showcase our solution.
Great. It was a very popular session, and we got quite a few questions that came in. There were quite a few about pricing and the business model and how that could work out for both Virtuozzo and for the service provider. Maybe you could talk a little bit about your pricing model and how a service provider can take that to market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sure. Thanks, Bill. Great question, and thanks again for your time during this session. So Virtuozzo, like Acronis, has really focused on building our portfolio, our solutions, and our pricing model tailored and built specific for the MSP, for the cloud service provider. And at its core, also, it must be simple, easy to adopt, affordable, and elastic. So the base foundation of our pricing is exactly that. It is not based on how many nodes or core or CPU, but quite simply, what is our RAM that is being used and how much storage is being used. And further, truly elastic in a pay-as-you-go scenario. So partners of all sizes, regionally, can really have an affordable point of entry to be able to start supporting these use cases and meeting the new market demand with pay-as-you-go consumption-based pricing.
Yeah, that's interesting. That really lowers the risk, I think, right? So they can scale up as needed and pay as they go. So
yep,
always
absolutely.
Always a good way to get started with service providers. So, you mentioned something that ties into another one of the questions we got here. what particular verticals are you seeing some of the use cases for Virtuozzo in, and maybe tie those two questions together, right? The ability to scale the pricing with entering a new vertical. Is that an opportunity for service providers to make some money?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at the verticals, we've got horizontal use cases that are emerging now at the edge. What are some of those? Think about police monitoring, public safety, computer surveillance at a regional, local, municipality level. So many types of use cases across public transportation, monitoring, traffic alerting, and then also expanding into government with utilities in smart metering and billing, parking, waste management. So some of the use cases emerging at the edge are going to identify some of the most popular verticals. So campus, security across universities, hospitals, again, in the public safety sector, state, local, federal government. And then we're going to see this whole emergence of smart cities, stadiums, sporting events, airports, public safety. Now, I also want to be careful. We're not talking necessarily about IoT here. That is simply a use case that is going to drive the demand for what we're focused on. And Alex is going to talk a little bit more about it, but is optimizing your infrastructure requirements to be able to support the edge use cases, Bill. So
yeah, I think that's where some of the things that Alex Miro was mentioning about latency and the edge, I think Virtuozzo really solves a lot of those hardcore problems. Right.
Sure.
Great. So one of the questions we got was from an MSP that, we as an MSP, what kind of changes would we need to make to our skill set to take advantage of these edge computing opportunities?
Yeah, I can take it. So I think that basically pertains to specific types of edge opportunities, because it's sort of infinite world. That's a concept, it's a framework, and it depends really on what kind of scenarios and vertical in the end you're going to target, as David mentioned. And but what is great here is that normally it will be the same ubiquitous underlying infrastructure that you're going to put as a service provider at the edge, so close to the consumers. And basically, in a nutshell, you just need to master that infrastructure level. And in our case, beauty of Virtuozzo Hybrid's infrastructure solution is that it does realize all the basic and all the most frequently required scenarios for the edge, and it is simple. So it's not rocket science. We provide training, it takes a couple of days, then certification, then some practice. So it's not months and months. What you should know, you should definitely, it's advantage if you having some skills in OpenStack and networking in order to be able to properly configure the hardware. If you want to jump into some advanced configuration, advanced solutions, but that's in a nutshell, classical engineering skills that will help you master Virtuozzo Hybrid infrastructure in a matter of days or a couple of weeks.
Great. I mean, you said there's some training and certification. It sounds like the educational program is pretty advanced and well built out.
Absolutely, yeah. So we have a very strong training program. We do certify all our partners. It's basically mandatory requirement. We are going over the time of next few months actually to make next step, even with the more of business support and business consultancy working together with the MSPs, learning the end customer scenarios and behavior, understanding their specific requirements, and helping them build solution for specific edge scenarios. So it's partnership basically. I guess that the idea is very simple. We are not looking at our relationship with MSPs as supplier customer. No, they are partners. We are partners. It's a partnership. The end customer is joined for us. They are facing end customer. We are not. We are the back end, but we are working together towards winning the deal. So we will really invest into making sure that our service provider customers understand how to deal with this, the complexity, workarounds, and how to onboard successfully the customers.
Great.
And Bill, if I could just add on that, I mean, what a better role model than Acronis to making business simple and easy for MSPs, right? And under Alex's leadership, the last couple of years, that's exactly what we've tried to do. It isn't just a product or just an edge appliance. It's the entire experience. What can we do to make this simple, align with your existing resources, to do what? To help you accelerate to market, to meet new market demand, to support your existing customers and grow new. And we've got and have invested quite a bit in the processes from sales to engineering, architecture, product management, where it's an entire collaborative process that, right, we're now in scale mode.
Yeah, I mean, Virtuozzo's been active in the service provider for so long. You really know how to get in there and get them to market very quickly. So
this is our family, and this family is growing.
Yep, that's great. So another question that came in is, what makes a buyer a good candidate for the Virtuozzo appliance versus using their own hardware?
Yeah, I would say that any buyer is a good buyer for Virtuozzo appliance. That overall, our recommendation is to go with this option, unless you have plenty of spare hardware on long-term lease that you must utilize, and that is a good quality and that is modern, and you can just start onboarding this. But that is rarely the case because this is sort of miraculous situation that I described. And in reality, the beauty of appliance is that the go-to-market speed is predictable. These appliances are readily available, so it's just a matter of shipping. We don't need to order the parts and configure. They're already there, waiting for you in the most frequently used configurations. The TCO of the appliance will be the one that you will unlikely manage to ever surpass, because it's again, it's very cost efficient, and these are the parts, and the whole suite of the appliance is ideally fitting each other. And then in terms of configuration, so although, as we said, it's not massively complex solution, but it is very powerful solution because it enables so many scenarios, and it does require certain level of hardware, although based on commodity components for sure, but still our experience shows that there are so many ways to not follow even the simple recommendation, in terms of how poorly sometimes you can configure the hardware, or the delivery time is unpredictable, something is breaking, network is not configured. So plenty of ways to make mistake. And if you're having a ready to use plug and play block appliance from us, then your go to market is becoming very predictable. The hardware arrives day X plus 5. You can already start onboarding the customers because everything is pre-configured. So I would highly recommend this route. Please inquire information about our appliances. Any parts of the world, we can ship and deliver together with our partners.
That's great. X plus 5. That's pretty impressive, right?
That is what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. So, Alex, I see that you also joined. We went over some of the questions that came in from the audience. Are there any summaries you have?
Well,
Again, so thank you, everybody. My apologies for, I was actually engaged in another session on a somewhat similar topic due to some of the scheduling issues, I guess. I don't know what's the right way to call it. But I've been listening to what Alex has been saying. I don't think I have anything substantial to add. I'll just say that as an Acronis representative, we work together very closely with Virtuozzo, all the time. And we do actually develop a lot of our own hardware, something that Virtuozzo has been benefiting to achieve those very spectacular numbers in terms of TCO and availability and the kind of fast speed from shipment to onboarding the customers. So I don't think I have anything to add at this point, unless there is any more specific questions to me.
So let's wrap this up. And Alex and David, tell us what our attendees can experience in the Virtuozzo sponsor booth.
Oh, yeah. So we've had a couple sessions already today. So please find the Virtuozzo booth, get your keyword so you can win the prize today and tomorrow. But what you'll find is I'll be there, but more importantly, our pre-sales engineer team will be there. So they're usually between an hour and 2 hours. We go through Virtuozzo's hybrid infrastructure, the value, the design, the foundation, the UI, the use cases, more discussions on the pricing. It's interactive. We welcome all comers, questions, chat questions, live questions. And then, time permitting, we have a great session where we talk about how you can launch VDI as a service. It's Virtuozzo's hybrid workspace. All right. And we go through a presentation there and look at a few scenarios. And of course, collectively, how all of that is driving demand for more Acronis backup, cybersecurity, and disaster recovery.
Great. So thanks, David. And be sure to check out the Virtuozzo booth. And thanks, Alex and Alex. What a great conversation you guys had today. I do want to let everyone know that you should check in the agenda. So up in the navigation bar, you'll see there's an agenda. Click on that and you can see the current live sessions, as well as at the home page of the Acronis Cyber Summit, you'll see that there's Acronis Cyber News Live. That comes on in between sessions. So as this ends, that should be playing. Likewise, you can always join the IT Channel Lounge or the Developer Hub, or check out any of the extra activities that we have. And then definitely check out the foundation and the opportunity to make a donation. So thank you very much, everyone. And,
thanks a lot, Bill, for facilitation, your support.
Great.
Thank you.
Enjoy the summit. Thanks.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.